April 1967. While the world celebrated Soviet achievements in the space race, behind closed doors, cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov faced an unthinkable dilemma. He knew his spacecraft, Soyuz 1, carried 203 documented faults, but Kremlin pressure demanded a launch, no matter the risk, no matter the cost. Komarov agreed to fly, knowing he might never return. What happened next turned a mission of national pride into a deadly, preventable tragedy. And with ground control listening helplessly, every word of Komarov's final descent was immortalized in chilling detail. Why was one man sacrificed for a political deadline? And what exactly did the world hear as he died alone in space? Vladimir Komarov wasn't just another cosmonaut in a flight suit. He was the seasoned commander who had already made history, piloting Voskhod 1 as part of the first multi-person spaceflight. Years of training had shaped him into the Soviet program's most reliable test pilot, a man who could keep his head while everyone else lost theirs. But in the spring of 1967, that reputation brought a different kind of weight. The Soyuz 1 mission was supposed to be a triumph, an orbital rendezvous, a crew exchange in space, a public demonstration that the Soviet Union was still ahead. Komarov knew the stakes. He also knew the spacecraft wasn't ready. Engineers had flagged hundreds of problems, some as basic as unreliable wiring, others as dangerous as a suspect parachute system. The pressure came from the top. The launch would honor the 50th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. There was no room for delay. Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space and Komarov's close friend, was officially named as backup. The two men met privately in the days before the launch. Gagarin tried to intervene, pushing to take Komarov's place, knowing full well the risks, but Komarov refused to step aside. He told friends, "If I don't make this flight, they'll send Gagarin. He's not expendable. I am." For Komarov, the choice was clear: protect his friend, accept the mission, and carry the burden himself. He wrote letters to his wife, quietly warning her that he might not return. He confided to fellow cosmonauts that he expected to die. Still, he suited up, walked out to the launch pad, and climbed aboard a ship he knew was flawed. Not because he trusted the system, but because he couldn't bear the thought of Gagarin dying in his place. In that moment, Komarov wasn't just flying for the Soviet Union, he was taking on the risks no one else dared to face alone. April 14, 1967. Inside a conference room at Baikonur, the State Commission gathers around a battered table. Kerim Kerimov, the chair, sits at the head. Papers are stacked high. Technical reports, defect lists, final checklists for Soyuz 1. Vasily Mishin, the new chief designer, stands with his team of engineers. They've spent weeks cataloguing problems, and the numbers are impossible to ignore. 203 faults, some minor, some catastrophic. The left solar panel might not deploy. The parachute system is untested. The guidance controls, the radio, even the wiring, none of it inspires confidence. One by one, engineers raise their concerns. Mishin tries to argue for more testing. Boris Chertok, deputy chief designer, quietly adds his voice, but the mood is tense. The 50th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution is days away. The Politburo wants a launch, not excuses. Orders from Moscow have been clear. The mission must fly on schedule. The pressure is more than just implied. It fills the room, settling over the technical staff like a second layer of gravity. The official defect dossier is circulated. Some problems are marked as deferred, others as acceptable risk. There's no formal vote, no written dissent. The leadership listens, nods, and moves on. Kerimov asks if anyone has final objections. No one speaks. In the Soviet system, pushing back too hard means risking your career, or worse. The commission signs off. Final preparations begin. Outside, teams start fueling the rocket. For the engineers, it's a bitter moment. They know the ship isn't ready, but the decision is out of their hands. The anniversary deadline is all that matters now. As the meeting breaks up, Mishin and his colleagues file out, their warnings left behind in the paperwork. The fate of Soyuz 1 is sealed, not by science, but by a date on the calendar. Komarov's first orbit was barely underway when the trouble started. The left solar panel, meant to unfurl and catch sunlight, stayed jammed against the hull. One half of the ship's power vanished in an instant. Komarov tried every command in the book, cycling switches, toggling relays, even kicking off a slow spin to shake the panel loose. Nothing worked. With only one panel feeding the batteries, the lights dimmed, the radio signal grew patchy, and the air inside the capsule chilled by the hour. Automatic orientation was out. The ship's star sensors, designed to keep the Soyuz pointed at the sun, depended on a full power supply. Now they flickered, then died. Komarov was left to fly blind, forced to steer by hand using only a tiny periscope and bursts from the attitude thrusters. Each correction drained the batteries further. He sweated through his suit, fighting the controls, knowing every mistake could send the ship tumbling. On the ground, controllers listened to his calm voice, but the technical readouts told a different story. Voltage dropping, life supports at risk, guidance systems failing one by one. Mission Control ordered Komarov to conserve power. He shut down non-essential systems, rationed radio calls, and kept the cabin dark. But the Soyuz wasn't designed for this kind of struggle. Without proper orientation, the working solar panel couldn't catch enough light to recharge the batteries. Each orbit, the margin shrank. Komarov's world narrowed to a cockpit full of warning lights and a failing hope that the ship could be brought home safely. As the hours ticked by, it became clear. The longer he stayed in orbit, the less chance he had of surviving the return. On April 24, 1967, Soyuz 1 began its final descent. Vladimir Komarov, strapped into the narrow return module, prepared for re-entry with a cockpit running on fading power and a checklist of systems that had failed him at every turn. He fired the retro rockets by hand, guiding the battered capsule into the upper layers of the atmosphere. For a moment, the battered ship stabilized. Then, the next failure struck. The main parachute container, deformed by pressure and manufacturing flaws, jammed shut. Komarov triggered the backup, but the reserve chute tangled with the drogue, a snarl of cords and silk that never caught the wind. The capsule plummeted through the clouds with nothing to slow its fall. Inside, Komarov's voice crackled over the radio, calm, clipped, reporting each step as he tried to save the ship. Soviet ground control listened, helpless. American listening posts picked up the same fading signal. A cosmonaut alone, fighting for his life. In the last moments, Komarov's transmissions turned short and technical. "Thank you for transmitting all of that. Separation occurred." No curses, no dramatic outburst, just the voice of a man who knew he was out of options. The capsule hit the ground at 90 miles per hour, the impact detonating the solid fuel retro rockets in a burst of fire and twisted metal. For a few seconds, the radio stayed open, then only static. The first human to die during a space mission had gone down with his ship. Every system and every safeguard failed, his last words carried away on radio waves that circled the world. On April 24, 1967, Soyuz 1 struck the ground at approximately 145 kilometers per hour, making Vladimir Komarov the first person to die during a spaceflight. Despite engineers documenting over 200 design faults before launch, Soviet authorities pushed the mission forward to meet a political deadline. Komarov's struggle in orbit and his final transmissions, monitored by both Soviet and US ground stations, exposed the high human cost of Cold War competition. To this day, the full transcript of Komarov's last words remains classified, and details of the launch decision process are still incomplete in the public record. Komarov's death led to immediate changes in Soviet spacecraft testing and safety protocols, influencing international spaceflight standards. His story stands as a documented warning. When political pressure overrides technical caution, the consequences can be irreversible.